I'm a professor in the Department of Pathology.
Garry Nolan is a professor at Stanford University. He is a man of science focusing on blood and biology. He is the last person you would expect to be hunting for ghosts in the Vatican. But he believes the Apostolic Archives hold the missing link to understanding alien life.
The Vatican's secret archives, or archivum secretum, actually genuinely only means private archives.
He says the Vatican is the oldest library of paranormal knowledge on Earth. They have data we need to survive, but the Church is rushing to digitize everything before the truth gets out. What did they find in the 13th century that scared them into silence? Why the U.S. government needed the Church. We need to talk about what happened in the summer of 2023. It was a hot day in Washington, D.C., but the temperature inside the congressional hearing room was freezing cold. A man named David Grush sat in a chair, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. What he said next made the entire world stop spinning for a second. He did not just talk about little green men, he talked about a specific crash, and he pointed a finger directly at one of the most powerful institutions in human history, the Vatican. But here is the catch. Most people missed the most important detail of his testimony. Everyone was obsessed with the aliens, but Grush was talking about a specific timeline. He said that in 1933, years before the famous Roswell crash, a craft came down in Magenta, Italy. This was deep in the era of Benito Mussolini and his fascist regime. Mussolini thought it was a secret German weapon. He was wrong. It was something else entirely. According to Grush, the Italian government recovered this object. They did not know what to do with it. It was advanced, it was dangerous, and it was clearly not from this earth. Mussolini set up a secret group to study it called Cabinet RS-33. But when the war started turning bad for Italy, the secret could not be contained. This is where the story gets crazy. The Pope at the time, Pius XII, reportedly stepped in. Now you have to understand something about the Vatican. It is not just a place where people pray. It is arguably the oldest and most effective intelligence agency on the planet. They have priests in every village, nuns in every hospital, and bishops in every major city. They hear confessions. They see everything. In the 1940s, the Vatican knew that the Americans were the rising power. So according to this explosive testimony, Pope Pius XII back-channeled this information to the United States. He basically told the Americans, hey, the Italians have a spaceship and you need to get it before the Nazis do. This changes the entire timeline of human history. We always thought the UFO phenomenon started in 1947 in New Mexico. But this proves the Vatican was dealing with non-human intelligence decades before the CIA was even born. They were the original gatekeepers. And that brings us to the big question. If they knew about a crashed saucer in 1933, what else do they know? This is where things get murky. The Vatican came out and denied it, of course. Marco Grilli, the secretary to the prefect of the archives, laughed it off. He told reporters that asking for these files is like asking to read the personal letters of Pontius Pilate. He wants you to believe it is a joke. But is it? Think about it. If you were sitting on the biggest secret in the universe, would you admit it just because a guy in a suit testified in Washington? No. You would bury it deeper. But the cracks are starting to show. Researchers are not buying the denial anymore. They are looking at the Vatican's massive collection of documents with a fresh set of eyes. They are realizing that the Church has been recording anomalous events for centuries. They call them miracles. We call them UFOs. The terminology is different, but the description is the same. Lights in the sky, beings descending from the clouds, messages delivered by entities that appear and disappear. David Grush just opened the door, but he was only talking about the 20th century. The real secrets, the ones that explain who these visitors are hidden much deeper in the timeline. We are talking about documents that go back to the Middle Ages. And getting access to those documents is almost impossible. The Vatican Apostolic Archives contains 53 miles of shelving. It is a labyrinth of paper. Unless you know exactly what you are looking for, you will never find it. It is the perfect hiding place. You can hide a needle in a haystack, but the Vatican is hiding a needle in a stack of needles. But recently, a new wave of researchers has started asking different questions. They are not looking for aliens. They are looking for messengers. And they are finding evidence that the Church has been documenting contact with extraterrestrials since the 13th century. The 1933 crash was not a surprise to the Pope. It was just another Tuesday for an organization that has been managing this relationship for 1,000 years. The secret is finally beginning to leak out. But what exactly is hidden on those 53 miles of shelves? 53 miles of hidden secrets. Let's talk about the physical reality of the Vatican Archives. It is not just a library, it is a fortress. Located within the walls of Vatican City, the Apostolic Archives house over 12 centuries of history. We are talking about papal bulls, letters from kings, requests from Henry VIII, and notes from trials that changed the world. But among these millions of documents, there are reports that do not fit the official narrative of history. Diana Walsh Pasulka is a professor of religious studies. She wrote a book called American Cosmic. She is one of the few outsiders who has been allowed to really dig into how the Vatican handles these archives. And what she found is mind-blowing. She argues that the archives are absolutely full of reports about paranormal events, but you have to know how to read them. If you go in there searching for the word UFO, you will find nothing. The term unidentified flying object was invented by the U.S. Air Force in the 1950s. A monk writing in the year 1200 or a nun writing in the year 1850 would not use that word. They would use the vocabulary they had. They would talk about silver shields in the sky. They would talk about flying houses. They would talk about orbs of light. Pasulka points out specific reports from the 1800s. There are records of nuns in their convents witnessing glowing orbs entering their cells. These orbs would hover, move intelligently, and sometimes communicate. At the time, the Church classified these as religious experiences. They called them miracles. They thought it was the Holy Spirit or an angel, but look at it through a modern lens. If a person today told you a glowing orb flew into their bedroom and hovered over their bed, you would call the Mutual UFO Network. You would say it was a close encounter. The event is the same. Only the label has changed. Pasulka says the historical record is filled with these events. She told reporters, the people at the Vatican, they don't even know where to look. It's in their basements. It is not that simple, though. The archivists are currently in a mad rush to digitize everything. They have millions of delicate, rotting papers that they need to scan before they turn to dust. They have to prioritize. They are focusing on the big political stuff, the wars, the treaties. As Pasulka explains, they aren't really prioritizing orbs that are bothering nuns in the 1800s. This means the evidence of alien contact is sitting there, ignoring, waiting to be rediscovered. It is hidden in plain sight. It is categorized under lives of the saints or apparitions. This brings us to a fascinating concept, the translation of the impossible. Carlos Aire, a history professor at Yale University, wrote a book called They Flew, A History of the Impossible. He studies levitation and miracles. He says these things are on the same spectrum as UFOs. He points out something crucial. Since the Renaissance, the Catholic Church became very strict about miracles. They did not just believe anyone. They held trials. They made witnesses swear oaths. They acted like lawyers. This means the reports in the archives are not just fairy tales, they are sworn witness testimonies. They are legal documents. When a nun said she saw a levitating object, she was cross-examined. These are high-quality data points. And for hundreds of years, the Vatican has been hoarding this data. So why the secrecy? Why not just release it? Well, imagine the chaos. If the Vatican admitted that the angels in their painting were actually biological entities from another solar system, it would collapse their theology, or at least force a massive rewrite. But maybe that rewrite is already happening. There is a growing suspicion that the Vatican is preparing for disclosure. They are not burning these documents. They are preserving them. They are keeping them safe. And they are slowly, very slowly, allowing scientists to take a peek. They know that the phenomenon is real. They know it is not going away, and they realize that they hold the longest continuous record of human-non-human interaction on the planet. The shelves are 53 miles long. That is the distance from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. Imagine walking that distance, and every step you take, you pass another stack of papers describing something that defies the laws of physics. It is overwhelming, it is terrifying, and it is all real. But the Vatican doesn't just have old papers. They are starting to work with modern scientists. They are realizing that faith alone cannot explain what is flying in our skies. They need biology. They need physics. And there is one man who is bridging the gap between the altar and the laboratory. And his findings are about to shake the foundations of science. The hope of surviving the great filter. Enter Garry Nolan. He is not a priest. He is not a theologian. He is a professor of medicine at Stanford University. He is one of the smartest immunologists in the world. He studies blood, cancer, and DNA. So, what is he doing hanging out with Vatican researchers? Nolan is part of a new group of scientists who are taking the UFO phenomenon seriously. He co-founded the Soul Foundation in 2023. Their goal is to bring serious academic research to the topic of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP. Nolan is blunt. He believes we are not alone, and he believes the Vatican is the key to understanding the history of this contact. Nolan has said, "The Vatican is probably the oldest library system of paranormal or supernatural knowledge still extant." He believes the archive has an aura of deep truth. If you know how to read it, you can pull the data out. He is not looking for religious inspiration. He is looking for patterns. C. Nolan has studied the brains of people who have had close encounters with UFOs. He has studied the metamaterials left behind by crashes. He approaches this as a medical doctor. If a patient comes in with radiation burns and says a saucer did it, Nolan looks at the burns. He doesn't care about the story, he cares about the evidence. He sees the Vatican Archives as a massive database of case studies. If he can compare a radiation burn from a pilot in 2004 with a report of a burning touch from a saint in 1350, he can establish a biological pattern. He can prove that the technology interacting with us today is the same technology that interacted with us then. This is why the Soul Foundation is so important. They want to initiate a dialogue with the religious institutions. They are not trying to destroy religion, they are trying to help it evolve. Peter Scaffish, the Foundation's director, told reporters that because the Vatican engages in interfaith dialogue, it is the perfect entity to engage with. Basically, if aliens land on the White House lawn tomorrow, the world is going to freak out. Religious people will be the most confused. Is this a demon? Is this God? The Soul Foundation wants to prepare the ground. They want the Vatican to say, "It is okay. We have known about these guys for 1,000 years. They are part of creation too." Nolan has a very optimistic view on this. He says that if an advanced species is showing up on Earth, it gives him hope. It means it is possible to survive the Great Filter. The Great Filter is a theory that says civilizations usually destroy themselves with nuclear war or climate change before they can travel the stars. If the aliens are here, it means they survived their own teenage phase. They made it past the cliff. The very fact that we think we see something, to me, is hope, Nolan said. But here's the deal. This scientific interest is making the Vatican nervous. They are happy to talk about possibilities, but they are less happy about opening the doors to the secret archives for a full audit. Remember what Grilly said? There is no document in the archives that regards extraterrestrial life. That is a lawyer's denial. He is technically telling the truth because the documents don't use the words extraterrestrial life. They use words like principalities, powers, messengers, or miracles. Nolan knows this game. He knows that to get the truth, you have to read between the lines. He is looking for the biological effects described in the old text. Did the witnesses get sick? Did they have sunburns at night? Did they experience missing time? These are the markers of a UAP encounter. And the evidence suggests that the Vatican has been sitting on physical evidence too. Not just papers, but maybe items, relics, things that were considered holy but might actually be technological. This brings us back to the claim of the 13th century document. It is not just about a random sighting. It connects to a specific legend that has puzzled historians for centuries. A legend about a house that literally flew across the Mediterranean Sea. This is where the story goes from strange to absolutely impossible. Angels or astronauts? The ancient misunderstanding. Let's focus on the 13th century. The user title mentioned a specific document released from this era. While the Vatican has not held a press conference waving a piece of parchment, the soft disclosure happening right now points directly to this time period. The late 1200s were a crazy time, and the biggest mystery of that era is the Holy House of Loreto. The legend goes like this. In the year 1291, the house where the Virgin Mary lived in Nazareth was in danger. The Crusaders were losing the Holy Land. Suddenly the house, the literal brick and mortar building, lifted off the ground. It was carried by angels across the ocean to Croatia, and then in 1294, it flew across the Adriatic Sea to Italy, landing in Loreto. For centuries, Catholics have believed angels physically carried the house. But let's look at this with fresh eyes using the cash cow logic. A heavy structure flying through the air, angels supporting it. Locals reported seeing the house hovering over the trees. Is it possible that the document researchers are buzzing about is the original witness testimony of this event? Could the angels described in the 13th century actually be the extraterrestrial messengers mentioned in the leak? This aligns perfectly with the ancient astronaut theory, but now we have serious scholars like Pasulka and Nolan looking at it. They are asking, what did the people of the 13th century actually see? They saw flight, they saw power, they saw beings coming from the sky. They had no word for anti-gravity transport, so they used the word angels. And it is not just the stories. Look at the art. Renaissance paintings from this era and shortly after often feature bizarre details in the background. The famous painting, The Madonna with Saint Giovannino, painted in the 15th century, but reflecting these older themes, clearly shows a gray, discoid object in the sky over Mary's shoulder. A man and his dog are looking up at it. It is not a cloud. It is a solid object with a dome. It looks exactly like a modern UFO. Another painting, The Annunciation with Saint Emitius from 1486, shows a circular opening in the sky shooting a laser beam down to the Virgin Mary. It is geometric. It looks technological. The 13th century document likely contains the written version of these images. It is the primary source. It describes the messengers not as spiritual vapors, but as solid beings who arrived in ships. This distinction is crucial. If the Vatican acknowledges this, it changes the definition of God's messengers. Father Francis Tiso is another key figure here. He is an expert on interreligious dialogue. He has talked about the need to classify these archives for the scientific community. He believes that studying these miracles connects us to the idea that we human beings are in some way in contact with other civilizations. Think about the implication. If the Holy House of Loreto was moved by tractor beams or anti-gravity technology, then the divine intervention was actually an extraterrestrial intervention. The Vatican has known this for 700 years. They have protected the site. They have built a basilica over it. They have treated it as the most sacred evidence they possess. But here is the catch. In the 13th century, calling it a miracle was safe. In the 21st century, calling it a UFO is dangerous. It raises questions about authority. If the aliens saved the house, do we worship the aliens? The church does not want to lose its flock to a UFO cult. That is why the secrecy is so tight. But the pressure is building. The document mentions messengers from the stars. Not heaven as a spiritual dimension, but the stars as a physical location. This subtle shift destroys the geocentric view of the universe that the church held for so long. The 1933 crash that David Grush talked about, that was just the return of the visitors. Mussolini was shocked. The Pope was not. The Pope looked at his archives, pulled out the 13th century file and said, "Ah, yes, they are back. But now that we know they are back, what does it mean for us today?" The silent connection. We need to take a step back. We need to look at the board and see the strings connecting everything. We have connected the dots from the 1933 crash in Italy to the 53 miles of secret shelves in the Vatican. We have traced the line all the way back to the 13th century messengers who supposedly saved a religious house from destruction. But if you are paying attention, you have to ask the big question, why now? Why is this all spilling out in the middle of the 2020s? Why do we suddenly have professors from Stanford University and high-level whistleblowers from the Pentagon talking about the Pope? Why are serious scientists suddenly interested in medieval miracles? It feels like a glitch in the Matrix. You have men of science shaking hands with men of faith. That should not be happening, unless they found something that forced them together. To understand why this is happening, we have to look at a group you have probably never heard of. This is the missing link in the entire chain. It is called the Esalen Institute. If you look it up on a map, Esalen sits right on the edge of the world. It is located on the cliffs of Big Sur, California. It overlooks the Pacific Ocean. The waves crash against the rocks, the fog rolls in, and it looks like something out of a movie. On the surface, Esalen is famous for one thing: hippies. It is known as a retreat center for yoga, meditation, and finding yourself. It was the birthplace of the human potential movement in the 1960s. But that is just the cover story. That is what they want the tourists to see. Behind the scenes, Esalen has always been a meeting ground for a very different type of crowd. For decades, this is where Silicon Valley billionaires, heavy-hitting spy chiefs, and elite religious scholars have met in secret. They do not go there to do yoga. They go there to discuss the impossible. They go there to talk about things that would ruin their careers if they discussed them in public. This is the invisible college. This is where the stigma disappears. And right now, the most important person in that room is a man named Jeffrey Kripal. Kripal is not a conspiracy theorist on a forum. He is a professor of religion. He is a respected academic. He is also a board member of Esalen, and he has a theory that connects the Vatican Archives directly to the UFO phenomenon. Kripal proposes something that sounds crazy at first, but the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. He says there is a deep, undeniable connection between close encounters with UFOs and religious miracles. Think about the stories we hear from the Bible or from medieval texts. You have saints who could levitate. You have figures surrounded by blinding light. You have people claiming they receive telepathic messages from the sky. You have accounts of figures passing through solid walls. For centuries, the church called these miracles. Now look at the reports from the Pentagon. Look at the stories from abductees in the modern era. What do they report? They report craft that defy gravity, levitation. They report blinding lights. They report telepathic communication without moving their lips. They report beings that can phase through solid matter. Kripal and his colleagues at Esalen believe these are not two different things. They believe it is the exact same phenomenon. The only thing that changed is our vocabulary. In the 13th century, you didn't have the word alien or spacecraft. You didn't understand technology. So, if you saw a being come down from the sky in a disk of light, you called it an angel. You called it a messenger. Today we have science, we have movies. So when we see it, we call it an extraterrestrial. But the phenomenon, the event itself, it hasn't changed. It has been here the whole time. This is why the scientists are suddenly talking to the priests. They realize that the Vatican doesn't just have religious texts, they possess the oldest, longest-running record of alien contact in human history. They just filed it under Miracles. This is where the plan comes into focus. This isn't just a theory discussed over coffee, this is an active operation. Kripal and his network have been quietly pushing the Vatican to open up for years. They know what is in those 53 miles of shelving. Father Tissot, the Vatican researcher we mentioned earlier, let something slip. He mentioned that Michael Murphy, the co-founder of Esalen, spoke to him 20 years ago. Murphy had a vision. He told Father Tissot that someone needed to go into the Vatican archives, but not to pray. He said someone needed to go in there and classify it in ways that would be accessible to the scientific community. Read that again. He wanted to take the miracles and turn them into data. He wanted to take the accounts of flying shields from the Middle Ages and analyze them like military reports. That plan, which started 20 years ago, is finally in motion today. The doors are cracking open. This brings us to the heavy hitters of today, the Saul Foundation. This is a new organization, but the names involved are massive. You have Garry Nolan, a top scientist from Stanford. You have David Grush, the intelligence officer who testified to Congress. They are all part of this same push. They are working on the same project as the folks at Esalen. Their goal is very specific. They are trying to prepare you, me, and everyone else for something called ontological shock. That is a fancy academic term, but the meaning is terrifying. Ontological shock is what happens when your entire reality is shattered in a single second. It is what happened to indigenous tribes when they saw modern ships for the first time. Their worldview collapsed, their gods died, their society fell apart. The government is terrified of this. They have run the simulations. They know that if the president walks out on the lawn tomorrow and says, aliens are real, they are here, and we are helpless, people will panic. The stock market hits zero. Law and order vanishes. It is chaos. But what if the church says it first? This is the strategy. The Vatican is the cushion. If the Pope comes out and says, my children, we have found life on other planets. They are God's children just like us. The panic is less severe. It frames the discovery as something spiritual, something beautiful rather than an invasion. The Vatican is positioning itself to be the spiritual guide for the post-disclosure world. They want to be the ones holding your hand when the sky opens up. This is why you are seeing the soft leaks. This is why they are already holding conferences on astrobiology. Did you know the Vatican has its own observatory? They have some of the best astronomers in the world. They are not looking for angels with telescopes. They are looking for exoplanets. Their astronomers have already gone on record. They have stated that there are billions of habitable planets out there. They have stated that there is no conflict between the Bible and alien life. They are slowly dropping the breadcrumbs. They are leading us down the path, step by step, so we don't freak out when we reach the end. The release or the leaking of information about these 13th century documents is a major part of this strategy. It normalizes the idea. It tells the public, look, this isn't new, this has always been happening. The messengers saved us in the 1200s. They crashed in 1933. They have been watching us for 700 years. Do not be afraid. So do you think the Vatican is hiding the truth to protect us or to protect themselves? And if these messengers return tomorrow, are we ready to hear what they have to say? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button and subscribe for more investigations into the unknown. Stay curious.